PTAs. We hope that today is informative. Angela will explain more, but basically we're going to not have like live Q&A. So if you have a question as you go along that you didn't get answered into that form, you're going to need to go back into that form and put it in there. We also welcome everyone to join PTA. I think you can join as soon as tomorrow for this coming year. It will be joinpta.org for both the high school, all the locals. So we hope you stay engaged. The high school has an active Facebook page, Dripping Springs High School PTSA, that you can join and follow, and we can help you get questions answered after today if you're looking for more information. Martin, I saw you come in and out. I don't know if you wanted to say anything really quick. You might have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, no, not really. She covered it. I encourage everyone to join. It's a very helpful information platform, and just look forward to hearing what we're going to find out today.
And FYI, Martin's the newly elected president for this coming year, but I think everyone knows him. He's been around. He's been around a while. All right, Angela.
All right, so we're gonna get started with a few introductions. And again, as you're coming in, just make sure you're on mute. You will hear some work in the background on my end, but we closed the door, so hopefully it won't be too obnoxious. So Vicki Metzger, I'm gonna spotlight you. She is our lead nurse in the district, but also one of our high school nurses. So she's here to also field some of those health-related questions.
And a lifelong Dripping Springs parent.
Exactly. Oh, also, I forgot to mention we are recording this so that I can post it later. And then we've got a few administrators on here. We've got Kelly Miller. She's one of our assistant principals. I'm spotlighting her.
Hi, everyone. Welcome.
Then Josh Kaiser. Spotlight him. He's one of our new assistant principals.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Good to see everybody.
And then, let's see. And then we've got Coach Zimmerman on here. I'm spotlighting you. Coach. And I think that's about it. I didn't see anybody else come on in. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and share my screen. All these people are in here to support for questions that you may have that I can't answer. So let's share screen. Okay. I'm just gonna keep it like this because it's easier for me to go back and forth between things. If you have any questions, in that email, there was a link to a document where you can add questions. They are kind of put into categories, but if one of your questions doesn't fit a category, you can put it at the end. There's an other option. Also, this QR code right here gets you to that document, so you can look at the questions that are being asked. A lot of the things that we're going to go through in this presentation will cover a lot of those questions, so we'll do all new questions at the end. So just a couple FYIs, we already introduced some of the people on here who are supporting this. Just so you know, last week, we had a committee of 20 teachers from different content areas. Vicki, our lead nurse, was there. Administrators were there. And we started to really tease out some of those high concern areas of when we return to school, such as what are we going to do with passing periods? What are we going to do at lunch, arrival, dismissal, all of that. And so we have a campus document that is in the works, but we needed perspectives of people who are in the building every day, working with kids with varied interests to be part of that. So we will push that out before in-person school starts. And yeah, we'll answer questions. If y'all haven't seen, this is the remote learning platform for the district. It has a ton of FAQs listed on that website. So a lot of the questions that are shared on the question document are also answered here. So if you ever have a question, I would try going there first. So we're gonna jump right into it. So I'm sure many of you have seen a variation of this. This is the schedule for the first 4 weeks of school. And middle school and high school are similar, except for some of the times are a little different because we have different minute requirements than middle school does. And so what this means is from 8:20 to 8:50, we'll have open tutorials. So every teacher will have a Zoom link that students can pop in for help, just like we would any other time of the year. Then each period is split into 2 blocks of time. So if you see first period, you've got up to, and this is important, it's up to 40 minutes of synchronous learning where students are checking in and they're either getting direct teach or they're getting help. Their teachers are spiraling, their teachers are answering questions, that kind of thing, but it's that live learning. And that's up to 40 minutes, but not very rarely, I would say, is a teacher going to use the full 40 minutes of synchronous learning. Then that second half of the block will go into asynchronous learning. And that's where kids can log off and do independent work. They're going to work on their assignments. They're going to maybe do virtual group work. It can vary that time, but there's no requirement for anybody to be online. And so that time really is kind of a work period for students. And so, for example, if a student is in volleyball, they're still going to do their first regular block class. And then they'll go to their second period, third period, they're following their schedule. So not a whole lot will change with the schedule. We have added Tiger Time this year. Tiger Time is tutorial time built into the day, because what we've noticed, and this was kind of a goal all along, is that buses get here late. Not every kid can access tutorials after school. So we wanted to make sure to try and build as much time as we possibly could within the restrictions of our minutes into the school day. And so Tiger Time will be used only for study hall or getting help. And that will also be where teachers have their Zoom link up ready to help students during that time. It's 21 minutes, so it's not super long, but that's about what we could fit in the day. And then lunch for the first 4 weeks is just everybody has the same lunch time. Okay, so there are examples of what direct instruction looks like. We kind of went through all of them. And again, I'll post this online so you can go back and look at what that means. So independent learning, that's your asynchronous learning. And again, talked about that. So those are just examples. We talked about what tutorials will look like. Tiger Time is attached to first and fifth. So it's not necessarily a separate period. A bell, when we're in school, a bell will ring notifying teachers of, okay, now it's tutorial time. But there will be no extension of first and fifth past what first and fifth is. Tutorial, that Tiger Time is specifically allotted for study hall or tutorials. All right, Canvas and Zoom. So hopefully everybody got a pretty good taste of Canvas all last year. The high school kind of kicked off right away in the year with it. So we were in a pretty good position and we're just gonna get better at it. We will use Canvas during the 4-week remote learning, but also during once we go back to school. All assignments will be housed in Canvas. We're really going to try and limit anything that is being passed out even when we're in person. And if it is being passed out, it's still going on Canvas. So we're gonna live and breathe in Canvas this year. And then we'll continue to use Zoom. The whole district is going 1-to-1 this year for Chromebooks. Of course, students can use their own personal laptops, iPads, Chromebooks, whatever they're comfortable with, but we have enough Chromebooks for every student to have their own. It will be an expectation that students bring their Chromebooks once we go into in-person as well. So here's our in-person bell schedule. The only difference is the lunch periods. So this just gives you a quick overview of once we get them back to school, what will it look like. We had to go to 3 lunches. Our lunches were packed last year anyway, but there was no way we could maintain social distancing with 1,200 kids in each. Well, that's an exaggeration. 1,000 kids in each lunch. So we had to at least go to 3. That's about what we could fit in our schedule and still do the 90. We can't go under 90 minutes per block period at the high school. And so as you can see, lunch is now in 2nd and 6th period, and that's mostly because we need our cafeteria workers to be able to leave at a certain time in order to get to their secondary district jobs, such as Kids Club. We do have ample time in between each lunch for cleaning. It's all hands on deck. We will all be helping out in the lunch room to make sure that the cleaning gets done before the next group of kids come in. Here's our instructional options. So I just wanted to kind of give you a breakdown into what synchronous, asynchronous, remote learning looks like, and then in person. So teachers are planning for the remote option first, and then what does that look like in person so that there's equity there. You're not going to get a whole lot of difference between the two. So the synchronous, again, is up to 40 minutes. So they'll get 40 minutes of direct teach or whatever that means. And then they'll go into their asynchronous. And then in the classroom, what that looks like is just like what it would look like in remote. Getting help one-on-one, small group instruction, partner work, that kind of thing. And so I will again post this so you can read through that a little bit more. All right, health and safety. These are the links here for the district health and safety, that R3 website. So that answers a ton of questions. And again, there right here is your QR code for the question and answer document. So cleaning and sanitizing, it will look very similar across the secondary levels and also into elementary. Custodians are going to clean and disinfect every classroom every single night. So this is a little bit different than usual. We're on more of a rotation schedule, but every shared room will be cleaned every night. Disinfectant wipes, hand sanitizer is going to be available in every single classroom. Students will help in sanitizing their desks, and there is a whole process that we have come up with. So it's hand sanitize before you come into the classroom. Teacher will spray every desk. You're going to wipe down the desk with a paper towel, and then you're going to go hand sanitize again. And that same process will happen at the very end of class as well. So that will have to be built into every lesson. Cafeteria will be cleaned, like I said, and disinfected before each lunch period. And there's hand sanitizer all over the building now, as well as filling stations for the water fountains. We've gotten more of those. So mask breaks. We've been noticing, as we've been wearing masks on campus in our meetings, that it's not easy to sit there with a mask on for an hour and a half. And so what we're gonna do is encourage teachers to implement mask breaks, take their kids outside, socially distance them, and allow them to have a little bit of a break. Also during lunch, because we're able to social distance our students at least 6 feet, and obviously they cannot eat with a mask on, they'll be able to have a mask break at that point as well. Masks are required for all students and staff when inside the building. And of course, we'll do some educational pieces as far as cleaning and sanitation goes, mask wearing those first couple days when we're back in practice. I'm looking at Coach Zimmerman, back in school. And then students may remove their masks during active exercise and mask breaks only. And at lunch, like I just said. So once we know for instructional choice who is choosing what, we're going to attempt to balance class sizes as much as possible. The reality is it will depend on how many kids come back to school is what is dependent on how many kids are in the classroom. So if 80% of our students come back to school, we don't have any more teachers and we have enough classroom space now that every teacher has their own room. So there's not going to be any sharing of spaces, but that same number of kids will go into the room. And so we will social distance as much as possible, but it is unlikely that we're going to be able to do 6 feet in a classroom if we have a large number of students come back to school on campus. Students may change their choice at the end of the 9-week grading period. So there is fluidity throughout this whole thing for, okay, I'm ready to come back on campus, or I really feel like I would do better on remote to go back and forth. The school clinic, I'm just gonna toss this over to Vicki because this is hers.
Okay, so now I just
You want
lost
me
that.
to share? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. There we go. Okay, so luckily in the high school, we have 2 nurses and we just completed construction on our newest remote clinic that was originally going to be intended to be like a wellness, mental health, de-stress clinic, but because of the COVID, as we like to call it, that is now going to become our well room, our well clinic. And the current nursing station is going to become our isolation clinic. So we have 2 separate clinics that will be each manned by an RN. We are both RNs in the high school. And we're going to do that. So basically what's going to happen is if a child is sent down to us with probable symptoms of COVID, which I'm not sure if you're all familiar with, but they could be, there's the probable symptoms of COVID are also ones that are in many other illnesses and may not even be in, a stomach ache, diarrhea, vomiting, a cough, a sore throat, a fever. So we're going to have to do, just because of the way the CDC and TEA has outlined it, that any of those symptoms, we are going to consider a possible COVID. We're going to do a pre-screen as much as possible before the student enters into the clinic. And that way, if it turns out that we can assess them and say they have migraine headaches and they have a migraine, then we can send them to the appropriate well clinic. But if it's something new and something that after a quick assessment, we've determined that this is probably or could be a COVID symptom, we are going to isolate them in a separate room. We have 2 rooms with doors. We are planning on adding 3 more areas that can be isolated, and we will then go on and do a more in-depth assessment and then contact parents if needed. So that's the way that the clinic is going to work. What we're trying to do too is to limit, because so many things can be seen or interpreted as COVID. And we understand too that maybe someone with a stomach ache doesn't really have a stomach ache. Maybe they're just a little dehydrated or ate lunch too fast. So we're putting into protocols into place for teachers to maybe allow the student to have a drink of water, use the restroom, rest for a few minutes in the classroom. And then if things haven't resolved, say after 20 minutes, then they will be sent down to the clinic. And they will be put, a mask will be put on them if they don't have one, to transition to the clinic. And at that point, we will take it from there. So
I'm gonna go to the next slide too, so you can talk about that.
And the same thing, we're going to treat students and staff at the same thing. We're going to do an assessment no matter what. We are going to take the temperature, but we're not saying that that's necessarily indicative of COVID, but it does give us a baseline, and that's just a normal way of taking vital signs. We're going to do the entire gamut. We're going to take the temperature, blood pressure, oxygenation level, just to make sure. And as we said, we're going to kind of do that pre-screen. We're going to try to triage as well as possible. Since we haven't had any students in, it's going to be for the first week. It might be a little iffy, but we're already planning on how to do this safely so that no one else is contaminated. No one who doesn't have any symptoms is going to be contaminated. And so the biggest thing, I guess, is if we do determine that they do have symptoms that are that could be COVID, that we're going to call the parent or guardian and request that they pick the student up within 30 minutes and no later than an hour. And the sick staff member will go home immediately. They would be able, unless, of course, if their symptoms are so bad, then we would be able to notify EMS and do it that way. But the staff is responsible for really getting themselves out of the school. We are also, every time we have someone in there, we're making provisions to be able to clean the clinic room, that isolation room, as quickly as possible. We're looking at some UV lights and maybe air purifiers that we're trying to see which is the best option for this so that we can quickly clean a room. And so if there's another person to come in, especially around flu season, we anticipate that this could be, there could be pretty full, that we'll go ahead and have a quick turnaround and yet still maintain the cleanliness of the room as much as possible.
Thanks, Vicki. Appreciate that. Also, if you notice SSMS there, that's because I took this from SSMS and made it a DSHS, and I didn't catch that. All right, additional measures for safety and health. Just a few things that we're thinking of: keeping doors open as much as possible to keep that air circulation flowing, assigning seats, and keeping seating charts. So it's going to be a little bit different than our kids are used to, just because we need to know, we need to keep them as separate as possible in any given space. We'll have safety signs all over the place, and then also limit shared supplies when possible. A week or so before in-person school starts, we will send out a general supply list of, we're collecting data right now from all the departments, and these are the things you're going to need so that there doesn't need to be sharing in a classroom. All right, moving around the building. And again, there's your QR code if you just came in to add questions. So when students arrive at school, they're going to be able to enter the building around 8:20. We're going to push that back as far as possible. It will align with when that first bus gets there. And then once students are in the building, they're going straight to their first and fifth period class. So there's no gathering anywhere. We do still need to figure out that breakfast part. We will have this cafeteria set up already for social distancing and to signs signifying where they can and cannot sit, how many students per a table. So we'll probably utilize that and have some staff monitors in there as well for breakfast. So we'll send all this out right before school starts of where people should be going. So if your car drop off, and this is kind of already normal practice for us anyway, at the front of the building, drivers will enter through the nearest entrance in the parking lots, and bus riders will be dropped off at the bus loop. We're looking at a couple different options for drop-offs for the bus, so everybody's kind of going in different doors. Again, tutorials, it will all be the same whether we're remote or not, but if we're in the building, we have a pass system that will train students on through Canvas so that they can request tutorial times through their teachers. Transitions between classes. So we're gonna do one-way traffic basically, and there will be signs all over to say, stay right, like you're driving. Which is really what kids do already on a normal basis. Classroom doors will be propped open in between classes so that kids aren't having to touch doors to go into places. Teachers will be in the hallways to move traffic along, administrative staff, of course, as well, and counselors, so that no one's kind of lingering around or taking masks off or whatever. Those times are the most important times for us to be following all the rules. Staff and signage, posted to reinforce, physical distance. And then Coach Z, athletics and PE. It's you. Unless you want me to go through this and then just field the questions.
Okay. I didn't know I was presenting.
I know. That's my bad. You want me to do this part and then you can answer the questions?
Either way, I mean, I can just tell what we've been doing over the summer in strength and conditioning, which is going to be fairly similar. The PE classes are going to be a little bit different just because if we're sharing with athletics to spread everybody out, they're going to have to be outside, obviously when possible with weather. The procedures and protocols we've been using all summer as far as our check-in procedures, our Google form before you get there, answering the questions, the COVID questions. If you answer yes to any of them, you're staying home. When they get there, we've got different personnel in charge of making sure that they've done that. Also, when they enter a building, they have to have a mask on. They have their hands sanitized when they get in there. Also, when they leave the building, the same procedure. We try to do it in a same as when you come into like Costco. That we've got tape on the floor actually all throughout both field houses. As far as trying to keep everybody socially distanced, leaving, we'll do it in shifts as well. Leaving like the weight room. We're trying to avoid close contact as much as possible. When we go outside, we're still able to do per the TEA and UIL normal activities, just not when you're in line waiting to go, spread out, and then going through the different drills. We haven't used equipment like sleds and things that you put your hands on. But if we did, we'd have to sanitize those just like we do in the weight room. In the weight room, we have our kids using equipment. They sanitize it with spray after each use. And then in between different groups, we have what are called electrostatic sprayers with disinfectant in it that we go throughout the entire weight room. The locker rooms, UIL and TA have opened up our locker rooms. We have not been in them. There hasn't been a need. We are discussing about how do we enter and exit our locker rooms. There's been some talk about are we going to be able to do it in shifts? Obviously, when you go in to get changed, you have to have a mask on, and those areas are going to be cleaned daily, if not several times. And then also we're encouraging our kids, just like we would any season where we have the flu and things like that too. Wash your hands repeatedly. Our kids have to bring their own water bottles with their name on it, and they don't share. We do have water cows to refill water bottles, but that is, there's no contact. The coaches are the only ones allowed to touch the water cows, and they refill the water bottles held by the kids. So there's nobody touching the different equipment. And so we're probably going to encourage our kids the same once we get to the school part of it, to bring their own water bottles. That will keep everybody from touching or accessing the same equipment. And we're still in discussions about how laundry and those sort of things are going to work. So that information will be coming out when we get it finalized.
Thanks, Coach. Another question that came up a lot is, can my student be remote and still come to practice or whatever? So the answer is yes. They can be remote and come to that period, that UIL period, or an elective period that is hands-on. So it's not totally just UIL based? Go ahead.
One thing with that, they have given us, and I say TEA and UIL have given us flexibility within those periods because they know places like gyms, weight rooms, you can't put as many kids in those places right now as you used to be able to. So our quote unquote athletic period could start outside of the school day because we might have to stagger our practices, especially in an area like the gym when you're sharing it with volleyball, boys basketball, girls basketball. So we're going to have to get a little bit creative, and there's going to be some unique time frames there that the UIL is allowing us to do those things. Places like football where we've got 160 kids in one locker room. We've got to have a different timetable for those. So our athletic period, the 2:30 to 4:15 in the afternoon time frame, might not be quote unquote our athletic period for certain sports. And so we're going to set those up. But we are, as allowed, having practices. Nothing, we have strength and conditioning going on now. Practices and competitions for tennis and cross country start September 7th per the new schedule. But we are looking at how we do those locker rooms and those athletic time slots. And so that's going to get a little creative, but you do have to come to practice. If you're going to be competing in that activity, you have to come to those times that we are practicing in person. And there's going to be more information on this if there's a student that can't practice or play this year. There's been several questions about next year, and we're going to treat next year as next year. We're trying to get through just the fall season right now.
Yeah, and I do want to clarify as far as electives and any other UIL related activities like band or theater, they will be able to come up to school once in-person starts. So it's not the 4 weeks of remote learning, it's once in-person starts for that class period.
Yes, so some of those electives they'll be able to come up for sure. The fall UIL events, there will be in person, the strength and conditioning and in person, which is going on right now. Once we start school as well.
Yeah.
So the winter sports, soccer, basketball will be a little bit different. They'll have the ability to work out, but it's not a practice schedule. Football, volleyball actual practices start September 7th, which I think is a week before we actually come back to in-person school.
Yeah. Thanks, Coach. All right, cafeteria was another big question. It's a big question for us. We have a plan for it. We can fit 100% capacity split between 3 lunches in our cafeteria spaces, meaning Tiger Hall, competition gym hall, library, and Tiger Paw are some of the areas that we're looking at. Of course, when it's nice, we would like kids to go outside, but we needed to plan for if it wasn't good weather that they could all fit. We are looking at a rollout approach for lunch when students come back so that we can get all of these practices and procedures in place and then slowly allow students to go into the cafeteria so that we're not doing everything all at once. And like I said, they're all 6 feet apart and signage will indicate where they can sit. Lunch line, also there will be social distance stickers on the floor, and we will have to come up with a staggered way for students to get into line should they want to buy their lunch. We're all going to help clean between lunches, including our custodians. Microwaves are not going to be available just because they're high touch. And so if you're bringing your lunch, just make sure that it's something that doesn't need to be heated. Food items will be pre-portioned through the cafeteria, so there's not going to be a ton of grabbing and using some same utensils, and so that will all be kind of suspended for the year. Of course, hand sanitizer is available and washing hands. The restrooms, we're going to have to limit occupancy, so signage will be on the door. We'll also be providing signage within the bathrooms to indicate which stalls to use. This is self-explanatory. I hope everybody does this already. Increased disinfecting will occur during the school day. Again, they're going to be cleaned every single day in between classes, those bathrooms. We'll also have a pass system. We had that last year, but it's not going to be a physical pass. It'll be more of something along the lines of a sign-in, sign-out sheet in the classroom so that we're not having multiple people touch the same pass. Student aids and PALs. So students in courses that would normally go to other campuses, elementary and middle school, like Enrich and PALs, are going to remain on campus until possibly it's safer to cross-contaminate campuses. Our Cornerstone students, there are still many of the internships are still asking to be filled, so that will be case-by-case basis, and also parent-student comfort level. So some additional changes, and you'll get more information about ROAR if you're a freshman and freshman parent, but we're going to do it virtually in August before remote learning starts, and it's going to be a student Zoom and a parent Zoom, and it's going to be, the student will be led by students and the parents will be led by administrators and counselors, and it'll be kind of an overview of what does a remote learning look like for your child at high school, and then Q&A. We will try and do something once we go back in person. We're thinking of doing something for the freshmen because they're obviously not going to know the building very well. So how do we integrate them into high school without overwhelming them once in-person we return to in-person. If you are going to pick up your student before the end of school, you will just need to call the front office. They'll call for your student, and then they'll have your student meet you out in the front. So we're just trying to limit the number of people coming into the building. Most meetings are going to be held virtually, so that includes ARD meetings, 504 meetings, PTSA meetings, Meet the Teacher Night, parent-teacher conferences. Those are all going to be on Zoom, again, trying to eliminate as many people coming to the building as possible. And then lastly, role as a parent. Again, this is the link to the shared question documents, QR code. We are asking that every morning you do a health screening with your student before you send them to school. Those questions are pretty common knowledge, but we will post them, of course, so that you can run through them in the morning. Follow the requirements for keeping your sick student at home. Pick up your child within 30 minutes to an hour at the most of being called. Of course, if they drive, they can drive themselves home. Drop off, we've talked about that. And I think the most important part is we're gonna really have to partner together this year, especially the first 4 weeks, to ensure that our students are checking in and getting the instruction that they need. And if there are issues, we need to know. So reach out to your administrators or counselors so that we can help you through this time, because it will definitely be a partnership before we can get, it's always a partnership, but more so than ever. Lastly, communication will be sent out regarding in-person norms and guidelines. Like a lot of the stuff we went through is going to be compiled in a really easy to read document, and it will be sent out before in-person learning resumes so that everybody's on the same page once we start school in person. And that is it. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to have Miss Miller kind of feed me questions that didn't get answers.
Okay, the first ones are masks. What is your policy if a student refuses to wear a mask? Will the parent need to pick them up?
If a student refuses to wear a mask, all of secondary is doing the same thing, and it's going to be a leveled system. And also case by case, there is always going to be those unique cases of, well, my student has an issue where they can't wear a mask, so we will work with those families in particular. But if it's just outright refusal, then it becomes more of a disciplinary issue.
Face shields.
Face shields will be allowed only in certain circumstances with, in communication with the school nurse, with Miss Metzger, just as far as student health needs. But face shields alone are not going to be allowed. Everybody will wear a mask.
Safety measures during performances in the auditorium.
Safety measures during performances in the auditorium. Those will all be indicated through TA and UIL, but it is all of the same things: 6 feet distancing, masks required, hand sanitizer before you enter, that kind of thing. And those policies, once we are able to have live in-person performances, will be pushed out.
Virtual science labs, and then is there an option to where we could do labs in person or hybrid?
Virtual science labs, labs in person, hybrid. So for sure, the first 4 weeks of remote learning, and then even into when we split remote to in person, teachers will be doing demonstrations as part of their direct teach. And then our science department is putting thought into, can we put together lab equipment to send home to students and use things that you would normally find at home to do lab experiments to replicate as much as possible that curriculum part.
Are there any electives that will not be offered to remote students?
All electives will be offered to remote students. We have not changed the master schedule. Everything that we were able to offer, we offered. And so nothing in your student's schedule will change.
If an elective isn't required for graduation, can we waive those electives for this semester to reduce time and exposure?
So graduation requirements remain the same. Those have not been amended by the state, but we are offering electives. So it's not an issue to whether or not you have to take an elective. Everybody will still do their regular schedule.
How do we do schedule changes?
Schedule changes will be like normal, except via Zoom or through the counselor's office. So you're going to make a meeting with your counselor and they're coming up with a system for that, but it'll be like normal.
Clubs and extracurriculars for remote students?
Yeah, so extracurriculars for remote students, there of course will be the option to come to campus, but if that is beyond your comfort level, then every elective area is going to come up with a way to provide instruction virtually. So for example, a virtual daily workout in athletics.
Tests and quizzes, they can be handled differently for remote learning and students in person?
So tests and quizzes, that has been probably our most recent conversation as far as equity between in-person and remote. But when we start remote, we are getting a system, a software through Canvas that will lock down a student's computer, and so they can't access anything else on the computer. We're also looking at more authentic assessments, so less rote memory, multiple choice type assessments, and more application-based assessments where the student would have to have some sort of background knowledge in order to complete that assessment.
Will DSISD enhance or fast track discipline with behavioral issues so we don't have continued disruptions?
So discipline will be like normal. We will handle discipline as it comes to our office. It will look a little different virtually, but we do have steps to remedy that.
Okay. Once students are allowed to go back to school in person, would a teacher teach both the in-person students and the remote students at the same time? If so, how does that work?
So that is the model right now that we are with, is having the teacher teach both in person and remote at the same time. The reason being is it causes a huge issue, especially at the high school level, when we only are signifying remote students or remote teachers, because kids will be coming in and out constantly. And so at the very least, our teachers will have the same student population throughout the entire year. And where our entire in-service revolves around how do we do that, and how do we support teachers in doing that. And as we've been practicing as an administrative team over the summer with like Zoom meetings and that kind of thing, we've been learning a lot about what does that look like.
How will students fulfill a schedule in-house internship when opting for remote learning, for example, with the theater program?
Yeah, so those students can come. Otherwise, there are ways. Everybody will get credit for the classes they've signed up for. And so it will just be us getting creative as far as how they can participate if they're not comfortable coming in person to those classes.
Is the swim team still available to practice at the Y? And if so, when?
Yes, swim team, right? Coach Z is still practicing at the Y. Do you know when?
Yes, the time hasn't been finalized, but I think the varsity or the top group is in the morning, 7 to 8:30 ish. I probably shouldn't even tell you, but it's in the morning, and then we have an afternoon time for the younger kids. But that's something Coach McCarthy will put out here pretty soon, in a couple weeks.
We're going to continue on with UIL questions.
What does a freshman athlete's day look like for in-person learning?
What does a freshman athlete's day look like for in-person learning?
That kind of depends on number one, when we come back to in-person, and then number two, what sport that they're in. If you want to start the fall with football, the freshman athletics is fourth block, which I think was at 2:45. Mm-hmm. Is that what starts? 2:45 to 4:15, and then practice will carry on after school. Someone like baseball happens in the spring. The freshmen practice after school, so you'll actually get out of class. I believe it starts around 4:30 to 4:45. And they have about an hour and a half practice typically. So it kind of depends on the sport, first block or fourth block when they're practicing.
Yeah, and their schedules will remain the same. So that, like, if you're in person, things don't look a whole lot different as far as where you're going.
What happens when a player or a coach contracts COVID? Would this cause an immediate suspension of the season?
Do you hear that?
Yeah, that not necessarily a immediate suspension of the season. Obviously anybody that gets COVID is going to be quarantined. I think it's the same. I think, Ms. Gomez went through kind of the progression that, you have to have the 72 hours and then 10 days from the onset of the symptoms. And you handle it the same way you'd handle it in class. When your direct contact is a little bit different than indirect contact. So there's a possibility that whoever contracts it will be at least 14 days. And then anybody who's been in close contact with them. That right now is our guidelines from UIL. Those are ever changing. So we've had strength and conditioning going on the last 8 weeks over the summer, and those guidelines have changed about 4 different times. And so we continue to monitor the CDC, the TEA, UIL, and those are pretty clear.
Yeah, and everything that Coach Z just described is listed on that R3 website too. So if you want to really look at what the system level is, it's on there.
Will athletic trainers find out when they get schedules, which sport they will be supporting? And is that activity a class that a student can do remotely?
Athletic trainers.
Athletic trainers, yes. As we get going, they do find out what sports they're doing. I think we try to have everybody do 2, depending on kind of the schedule. And then those are things right now that the UIL, TEA said that we have the access to do in person. Depending on what time of year those sports are starting. So we'll be on campus with athletics. And so the athletic trainers will be there. It'll look a little bit different for them. Typically, they're in charge of a lot of, water and different things like that, which at this point, they're not going to be. But it's still a hands-on class, and they still will be at practice.
That's pretty much it for him.
Okay. Thanks, Coach Z.
Okay.
That was it for you.
Will remote students that are involved in music courses that take place during the school day, such as orchestra or choir, be able to participate in person for that class since they're considered UIL?
Yeah, so classes like orchestra, band, choir, yeah, all of those fall under that same category of being allowed to come just for that class.
As infection rates continue to decrease, will measures and procedures be adjusted accordingly?
Yeah, so as knock on wood, COVID cases decrease, the TA, our governing bodies, so that's kind of where it starts, is governor, TA, district, UIL district. They will continue to amend those practices given the circumstances.
Do you foresee the high school being a fearful, stressful environment or comfortable, encouraging place of learning?
Yeah, so I think, when we talk about what does lunch look like, what do passing periods look like, what does arrival and dismissal look like, there's going to be practices that have to be in place in order to ensure as much safety as possible. Again, we can't guarantee safety, but we are going to do our best to ensure it. So that's going to be different and it's going to feel different. But I'm going to tell you, in that classroom, that relationship with that teacher is what is going to make school feel normal.
If they go in person, is it possible that they would be sitting in a class and watching a pre-recorded video lesson that a teacher previously made instead of learning from a live teacher?
So no, like I said, with synchronous and asynchronous learning, so at the very beginning, the teacher can do the direct teach. Well, that will be live. It will be on Zoom for everyone else. So it's not going to be sitting and watching a screen all day like, oh, I could just be at home doing this. It will be that in-person environment.
Can seniors leave for off-campus lunch?
Seniors can leave for off-campus lunch.
What protocols and standards are being put in place for substitutes when a teacher is out sick for any reason?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know HR is working really hard on that. And so that I'm sure will be updated through HR as we get those protocols.
I'm going to skip this one. I think someone's still writing in it. How will you address limited bandwidth and Wi-Fi?
Is that a remote question?
Technology.
Okay.
Yeah.
So limited bandwidth and Wi-Fi. So if you choose to do remote learning, the district has ordered some pretty substantial hotspots that aren't like the ones that we had in the spring. So they're unlimited data and more megabytes. And so that will help for those who don't have that consistent access to Wi-Fi.
This one's about internet failing and children not being able to log in for synchronous learning. Will they be counted absent or penalized?
Yeah, so students who, if you choose to be remote or even during the 4 weeks of remote, if you get kicked off your internet or it shuts down, you will be counted absent, but the work that you need to do won't be held against you. It's just communicating with your teachers at that point, like, hey, this is what happened. And they will get with you just like in any other circumstance and be like, okay, well, how do we help you make this up? So the attendance part, I'm not super worried about as far as, you know, you getting kicked off of the internet, but it's the communication part that will need to happen.
Can in-person students attend only for core classes and remote for electives? Kind of the opposite of UIL.
It's an interesting question. As of now, no. Core classes are, if you're in person, you must come to your core classes in person. If you're remote, then you stay remote for your core classes.
Will the Tiger Shack be open?
Tiger Shack will probably look different. I know last year they were working on putting everything online anyway, and so that probably will become their big project.
Will after-school clubs be available in person and or remotely?
After school clubs, that's a little bit different. We're not quite there yet, and I know that we have some students thinking about those things, and that is something that we're going to have to work out within the first 4 weeks of school when we're remote.
Last question. What is the process for parking on campus for students?
So it's as normal. We didn't put it in the verification of enrollment because we didn't feel comfortable asking y'all to pay for a parking permit when we don't know when you're going to come back on campus. So we will be amending the cost depending on how long out we go remote. And so once that happens, once we come back in person, it'll be more like old school where you're coming in and getting your pass from the assistant principal's office, but you'll still be able to pay online.
Someone's trying to type right now.
Oh, there's one question being typed. Now they feel like a lot of pressure, I'm sure, whoever that is.
Attendance policy.
Attendance.
Exam exemptions, attendance.
Oh yeah, exam exemptions will not exist this year because of all the different types of ways learning is going to happen. So unfortunately, that part gets tabled for now. All right, you can continue to put questions in that document.
I have a question.
Oh, Ms. Miller has a question.
So the ones that we posted at the top, questions that could be forwarded to central office, how will parents find the answers to those questions?
So those questions that say forward to central office, I've already shared with central office, and they responded to me like, thanks for the feedback. We will look at ways of implementing that into our FAQs. Those might not all go into the FAQs. So if you're really wanting that answer, I would email directly someone at central office, depending on what the question is. All right, so keep adding questions. What I think I'm gonna do is the ones that don't get answered, if you will put your name next to it, I'll make sure I email you directly, or you can just email me your question personally. That's fine, I can answer it that way too. And then I'll put the answer either in the document or I'll just email you the answer. So thank y'all for being here. I know there's a lot of anxiety that goes along with making this choice. We want kids back in school, but we want kids and teachers to be safe when they're back here. And so we are looking forward to what this first 4 weeks looks like. I think we're gonna learn a lot this year. I think we're gonna come out better in the end as an education system. And I just am excited to see what that looks like. So thank y'all, and please feel free to reach out to your administrator, your counselor, myself, Coach Z, Ms. Metzger, whoever, when you have questions. We're here to answer them. Oh, PTSA, anybody, y'all want to close out or say anything?
Thank you all for providing all the information.
Yeah, thank you so much for all your hard work. We know it's been a lot, and a lot of probably sleepless nights and days and crazy, but we do really appreciate you, and we're looking forward to helping y'all however we can.
Thank you. All right, that's it. So I'm going to go ahead and end for all. Have a great weekend.
You too.